Now, China's economy is making headlines every day. Yesterday, we told you about the falling exports. Today, there is more bad news from China. The Chinese economy has slipped into deflation. What does that mean? Prices of consumer goods have fallen. Everything is getting cheaper. It may sound like good news, but it's not. Deflation is the opposite of inflation, and it translates into no economic growth. In other words, China's economy has tanked. The world is talking about it. But the people of China are not. They're wary. Officials are resorting to self-censorship. They're refusing meetings and watching their backs. They're afraid of inviting Xi Jinping's wrath. We'll tell you all about it, but first the numbers. Consumer prices have fallen in China. It's the first such fall in 3 years. Last month's consumer price index is out. It fell by 0.3% year on year, meaning it's 0.3% lesser than this time last year. In the month of June, there was no change. Prices did not move. In the month of July, we have seen a fall. Now, what is the consumer price index? It is a measure of inflation. It tells us how consumer goods are priced. And what kind of goods are these? The kind that we buy or use every day, stuff like food, clothing, transportation. Their prices are falling in China, and that's bad news for the Chinese economy. When an economy deflates, everyone suffers the consequences. Prices fall because people are buying less. And you know what happens when demand falls? It impacts production. Factories make fewer goods. This has a trickle-down effect on jobs. Low demand and low business leads to layoffs. Over a longer period of time, it hits investments and businesses. It leads to losses. And the Chinese economy is going down that road. What about the rest of the world? They won't be immune to what happens in China. Beijing's economic decline will affect everyone because China is a major economy. It is a major importer too. It's the world's largest marketplace for energy, for raw materials, and for food. Deflation in China will mean a drop in all these orders. The Chinese will import less, so countries that depend on China for business will feel the impact. They'll have to look for other buyers. And here's something else you should know. This did not happen out of the blue. China's deflation has been in the making for a while now. At the beginning of this year, they set a target. China wanted to keep inflation at 3%. But it has failed. Inflation has fallen into negative territory. The government tried giving some stimulus. They also slashed interest rates. They offered tax incentives to businesses. But there was no major relief package. Experts have repeatedly called for such a package, but Beijing has refused to go down that path, and that's problematic because China's economy is seriously sick. It is like a patient who needs surgery, but Beijing is only offering it Band-Aid. It won't work. So the question is, why are Chinese officials hesitating? It's hard to say because they're not talking. They seem to have gone incommunicado. Investors, bankers, business owners, economists, they've all tried to reach these officials. And these are people who regularly visit China. They hold frequent interactions with technocrats. But in recent weeks, they haven't been able to get in touch. Reports say invitations for coffee or dinner are being declined. If they do get a chance to meet, there is no frank exchange of opinions. Officials stick to templated talking points. Again, the question is why? And the answer is this. Chinese officials are under scrutiny. There is now a new anti-espionage law in China. It came into force in the month of June. Its provisions are vague by design, and the punishment is harsh, like life imprisonment, even execution in extreme cases. And this new law has sent Chinese technocrats into a shell. They won't speak. Beijing is going to great lengths to protect information. This year, China also rolled out an app. It is used to train government workers on how to keep a secret. All officials have to take this training. They have to spend 4 hours on the app. They also have assignments, essays, tests. There was a time when China's technocrats were celebrated. China had a reputation of running a professional bureaucracy, but today they're being treated like school kids. They're being made to take tests. And all of this has consequences, and they're showing. Foreign direct investment has fallen to a 25-year low. Foreign funds are not investing in Chinese stocks. The market is too unpredictable. China has lost growth momentum. More importantly, China has lost the trust of the world. The big story tonight is a really big story. A few years back, it would have been impossible. But now the impossible is happening. Saudi Arabia and Israel will normalize ties. This is a truce that has been many years in the making. It's being brokered by the US. We've been tracking the meetings and the statements. The signs were very much there. It was more a matter of when. The reports came a few hours back. There's talk of a deal and broad points of convergence. A final agreement is yet to be hammered out, but we are told it is finally happening. Washington and Riyadh have reached an understanding. They have agreed on the key points, the key pillars as they're calling it. Reports say both sides have made big concessions. And this is extremely significant. To understand why, one must first understand their history. Saudi Arabia is an Arab kingdom, the de facto leader of the Muslim world, home to the holiest sites in Islam. Israel is a Jewish state. For the longest time, denied existence by the Muslim world and engaged in multiple wars with its neighbors. So Saudi Arabia and Israel were sworn enemies. The biggest point of contention was Palestine. It's a very complex story, but on a very, very basic level, it's also a fight for land. Palestinians see Israelis as occupiers. Saudi Arabia backs the Palestinian cause. Its troops have fought 2 wars against Israel. But at some point, the sands shifted. Iran became a bigger enemy. The Saudis are a Sunni Muslim kingdom. Iran has Shia majority. They were at loggerheads. Iran and Israel are also enemies. And what's the enemy of your enemy? A potential friend. So Israel and Saudi Arabia began a secret relationship. Now they're making it public, and the matchmaker is America. Under Donald Trump, the US got multiple Arab countries to normalize ties with Israel, and it happened with Saudi Arabia's blessing. They signed what's called the Abraham Accords. In recent months, Washington made another push. There was a series of discussions with Riyadh. The Saudis made some demands. The Americans most likely agreed, which is why they have what they're calling the broad contours of a deal. What are these key pillars? Number 1 is Palestine. Saudi Arabia wants some concessions from Israel on Palestine. Number 2, nuclear reactors. Saudi Arabia wants a civilian nuclear program. The US, we are told, is on board. Number 3, security guarantees. The Saudis want protection from the US. They want America to remain invested in the region, and Washington is apparently willing to discuss it. So those are the key pillars, and this was the first step. Now the process moves to the next stage, which is negotiations. There will be hectic diplomacy. The fine print will be discussed. The specifics will be hammered out. What kind of security guarantees does Riyadh need? What kind of protections will the US provide? And most importantly, what kind of concessions will Israel give to the Palestinians? All of those questions will be answered over the next year. Yes. Reports say the negotiations could take anywhere between 9 to 12 months. Let's now also talk about the concessions that Riyadh is making. The US wants a commitment from the Saudis, a limit on their growing relationship with China. Reports say Washington has asked Riyadh to agree to such limits, to quote-unquote distance itself from Beijing economically and militarily. That's the message from the US to Saudi Arabia. Will they agree, though? And to what extent? Again, it all boils down to the negotiations, but America has shown its hand. It wants to contain China in the region. It has a wish list for the Saudis. No Chinese bases in Saudi Arabia, limits on the use of Chinese technology like Huawei, and no yuan for oil purchases. The US could ask Saudi Arabia to price oil exclusively in the US dollar. And those are some sweeping demands, but that's the price that America could impose on the kingdom. We're given to understand that the Crown Prince is in no hurry to push this through. Reports say Mohammed bin Salman spoke to his advisors, and he has told them that there is no rush. The kingdom wants to see what Israel brings to the table, especially on the issue of Palestine. And that's the big hurdle for this deal, the trickiest part. Israel and its hardline government. Apparently, Riyadh wants to see a gesture from Tel Aviv, something that leads to a future Palestinian state. If not a commitment, at least a good faith gesture, something to secure Palestinian interests. And that's a big ask. Will Prime Minister Netanyahu agree? Is he in a position to agree? Reports say he will not make any significant concessions, but he is willing to offer a modest compromise. He doesn't really have a lot of elbow room here. Netanyahu is tied by the demands and politics of his coalition partners. They won't give him a free hand, and their politics does not allow any concessions for Palestine. So the road ahead is going to be very tough. And yet, The broad deal is a big step, a starting point on the road to normalization. This could change, like I said, the politics and the power equations of West Asia. It would mark the return of America in the game. Each side knows what it wants. The challenge now is to find middle ground. Before we begin the next story, I must tell you this. It is not a Hollywood film or a Netflix series, but it could be either. It has royal intrigue and the return of an estranged prince. No, he is not called Harry, though the similarities are uncanny. Tonight we are talking about drama in the Thai royal family. The second oldest son of the king has made a surprise visit home. He has come home after 27 years. He was stripped of all his titles when he was still a teenager, and since then he's been living in the US. So why has he returned now? The Thai royal family is going through a tough phase. The heir apparent is in a coma. There are doubts about the line of succession, and by happy coincidence, this exiled prince returns. Will this kick off a new Game of Thrones in Thailand? Here's a report.
You would think that today palace politics would be a thing of the past. In most countries, the monarchy has either been abolished or at least severely limited, so succession crises aren't what they used to be. Well, that isn't the case in Thailand, where the exiled prince Vachareson Vivacharewongse has made a surprising return. He put out a picture of himself getting out of one of Bangkok's famed tuk-tuks and created a storm of gossip. We'll get to why this is making headlines in a moment. To understand the importance of the situation, we need to understand Thailand's politics. The government is technically a constitutional monarchy, but the Thai version is a bit more hands-on. Thai monarchs have an outsized say in politics. They have traditionally been close to the Thai military. Military leaders have launched coups and claimed the support of the royal family. And in turn, various Thai juntas have protected the royal family's standing. They are protected from criticism because of strict lèse majesté laws. People can be thrown into jail for up to 15 years for criticizing the royal family. So you can see why the royal family still holds a lot of sway in the country. That's why it's important for the Thai people to know who the next monarch will be. And that's been up in the air for a few months. This is the King of Thailand, Maha Vajiralongkorn. He also goes by the regal name Rama X. He just turned 71 a few days ago. So it's fair to wonder about his successor. The king has lived a colourful life, to put it mildly. He's been married 4 times and has 7 children, 2 daughters and 5 sons. But only 3 of the children are officially recognized, his daughters and his youngest son. The 4 eldest princes were stripped of their titles in the mid-1990s. This is when the king divorced their mother. He accused her of infidelity. Never mind that all 4 of the princes and their sister were born out of wedlock. But nonetheless, he divorced their mother and went to marry twice more. He had a son with his 3rd wife. But the youngest prince reportedly has a learning disability, so he may not be able to take the throne. So this left the princesses as potential successors. The eldest daughter, Princess Bajrakitayabha, was expected to take power, either as the outright heir or as a regent. She was seen as a worthy successor. But then tragedy struck last December. The Thai royal palace announced she had experienced a severe heart arrhythmia. The princess has reportedly been in a coma ever since. Thailand's succession plans went up in smoke. No one was sure about who would succeed the colourful Rama X. But then this week, an exiled prince came home. Vachareson is the king's 2nd son. He's 42 years old. He spent 27 of those years in the United States. He now works there as a lawyer. The prince has always been pro-monarchy, which isn't really a surprise. The surprise is his visit. He came to the capital Bangkok on Sunday. The next day, he went to an important temple where he paid his respects to the country's supreme Buddhist patriarch. He then went to a childcare center for underprivileged families, which happens to be supported by the royal family.
I am delighted to return to Thailand. I have been warmly welcomed. I have been away for a long time, 27 years. It is like a dream come true to be back here. Before the plane could land, I looked outside the window I felt very emotional and grateful to the country.
ก็รู้สึกตื้นตันแล้วก็มีอยู่เมืองนอกมานาน
I have never forgotten that I am Thai. I have never forgotten about the importance of Thai culture.
Does that sound like an election pitch to you? The prince may have a lot more to do before he can claim the throne. The Thai royal family have made no mention of his visit. They haven't even acknowledged it. The prince hasn't said anything about the looming succession crisis either. But his visits to the temple and the childcare home look suspiciously like royal ceremonial visits. Could this be an audition for the royal role? We'll keep you posted.
ดีใจที่ได้เจอนะครับ
Cancel culture has claimed many victims, but I'm surprised it hasn't claimed this: beauty pageants. Think about how toxic and absurd they are. What are pageants all about? Rating and ranking women. Yet no one talks about it. The impossible beauty standards, the controversial swimsuit round, the abuse behind the scenes. All of this has been happening for years. The latest incident took place in Indonesia. The Miss Universe Indonesia was held last week. And since then, 6 contestants have filed police complaints. Their charges? Sexual harassment. At least 5 of them were asked to strip down to their undergarments. Apparently, it was a body check. These women were then photographed topless. Around 20 people, including men, were in the room. Some of them were asked to pose inappropriately. They were asked to open their legs for the cameras. Police officers in Jakarta say the investigation is on. Miss Universe organization has also released a statement. They say allegations of sexual abuse are taken extremely seriously. Well, good to know. But this isn't the first such incident. In fact, sexual abuse is common at beauty pageants. So what has Miss Universe done to stop it? Very little. Most of these pageants are still organized by men, not just the big bosses, but even people who look after the day-to-day stuff. So it's a hunting ground for predators. I have some examples for you. In 2017, the CEO of Miss America was suspended. He sent sexist and crude messages about former participants. In 2018, one of the sponsors at Miss Earth was called out by 3 contestants. They accused him of sexual harassment. In 2022, the organizer of Miss Rwanda was arrested, again for sexual abuse. Now, if you notice, these are all recent cases. All of them happened within the last 6 years, but that does not mean abuse is also recent. It's been a constant feature of beauty pageants. The only difference is this: women are finally speaking out. One such revelation came out in 2016. A Miss USA contestant accused Donald Trump. He apparently barged into the room when the contestants were naked. This was back in 2001. Donald Trump used to own Miss Universe back then. Why do these incidents keep happening? And more importantly, how do we stop them? Simple answer: stop them all. Beauty pageants are toxic, abusive, and outdated. They have no place in our society. These contests are designed for the male gaze. Some of them have Stone Age conditions, like Miss France. In 2021, activists filed a complaint against the competition. They said it was discriminatory. Contestants had to be 5.5 feet tall. They had to be single and childless. In what world does this qualify as beauty? A lot of people say these contests give women self-confidence and opportunities, a launchpad for their careers. But looking at the track record, we disagree. Pageants do not give self-confidence. They give body dysmorphia and eating disorders. Let me tell you what a study found in 2003. They surveyed 130 beauty queens, 130 beauty queens. Most of them had either won contests or had been finalists. 26% of them had an eating disorder, and that too by age 16. 48% of them wanted to be even thinner, and 57% were trying to lose weight. Remember, these were beauty pageant finalists. Despite that, around half of them were not satisfied with the way they looked. They wanted to be thinner. And the impact on the audience is equally bad. Imagine young girls watching and learning from these beauty pageants. They could also develop body dysmorphia. So let's recap what is wrong with beauty pageants. The contestants repeatedly get harassed. Most of them have low self-esteem, and the audience buys into this toxic standard of beauty. It makes you wonder, Why do we still have them? Because there's money to be made. The beauty pageant industry is worth $5 billion. Most contests are sponsored by cosmetic companies. That's another $300 billion. These groups benefit from pageants. They don't see women with body dysmorphia. They see a potential customer. Just look at the Miss Universe winners since the year 2000. Only 6 of them, only 6 since the year 2000, were from so-called first world countries. The rest came from the developing world, and do not mistake this for a diversity push. It was all about expanding to new markets, about selling the pageant dream to more people. But how do we get rid of them? One option is to make a generational change, to teach young girls what body positivity is, how pageants distort the idea of beauty and looks. Unless we do that, it's hard to end them. Our next story is about WeWork, but it's not just about one company. It tells you how the changing work culture is impacting businesses and how companies will have to be very agile to adapt and survive in this fast-changing world. Let's tell you about WeWork. It's a company that once wanted to, quote-unquote, elevate the world's consciousness. It was a motto that lacked substance. Perhaps it was a sign. Today, WeWork is struggling to survive. The company is in poor financial shape. The losses are growing. They've released their financials for the second quarter. WeWork has suffered a loss of $397 million. So the company is bleeding money. It is precariously poised. WeWork's management has 12 months to turn things around, else the company could collapse. How did it come to this? On paper, it seemed to have the perfect business model. WeWork runs shared office spaces around the world. As of last year, it was present in more than 700 locations in more than 30 countries. WeWork was started on a simple idea. Just like living in shared accommodation, people would rent an office together. You pay for a space in the same office and share some of the amenities, like the coffee machine or the conference room. WeWork runs the facility, it looks after the maintenance, and it earns the rent. Sounds like a good business model, but it's no longer working for WeWork. In a statement, the company lists 3 reasons why: excess supply of real estate, increasing competition, and the larger macroeconomic situation. As costs rise, memberships are going down. The company's stock is taking a beating. On Tuesday, when the numbers came out, the share value fell by 20%. And since the start of 2023, WeWork stock has lost 85% of its value. The management has a turnaround plan. It has 2 parts. First, it wants to reduce rental costs. Right now, many WeWork spaces are leased out by the company. Now they want to renegotiate the leases and reduce the rent. The second part is a bit more tricky. WeWork wants to hold on to its members, but it's proving to be tough. There was a time when every company needed an office. The pandemic changed that. And since then, people have been working differently. Employees want flexibility. Companies want to cut costs, so they adopt hybrid work if they cannot afford an office. It means they're cutting down on office space. Take the case of the US, the country where WeWork is headquartered. The United States of America. A record number of offices in the US are empty. Let me show you numbers from the first 3 months of 2023. Office vacancies touched 20%, meaning 20% of all offices in America were empty. In bigger cities like San Francisco, Dallas, and Houston, this number stood at 25%. Fewer workers were showing up. In America's top 10 business districts, office attendance remained below 50%. Here's another estimate. White-collar workers spent 28% of their time working from home, 28% of their work days at home. So there is plenty of office space, but not enough takers. As of last month, the US had 1 billion square feet of empty offices. 1 billion square feet. If you stack all these offices together and create one tower, it would be over 500,000 feet tall. That's more than 48,000 floors of office space. Imagine that. If you make such a tower of empty office space in Washington or New York, it will be bigger than the Mount Everest. In Washington, D.C. alone, such a structure would have more than 3,600 floors. In New York, more than 3,700 floors. This is the scale of the problem at hand. This is what WeWork is up against. It says this oversupply of office space is hurting its business. They could turn it into an opportunity, renegotiate rentals, get more space. But you see, co-working is not just about having the biggest office. It's also about building a culture. WeWork's biggest sales pitch was its community. The people who signed up for membership. They were promised more than space. They were there for the vibe, for the environment. That's the reason so many startups came on board. They bought into the sales pitch, that the community would feed off each other. So if a startup needed a graphic designer, for instance, they could probably run into one while getting coffee. But now most of these people are working from home, so the old sales pitch is not working, and this is food for thought for companies on how they must keep adapting. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Starting with Turkey, a strong gust of wind took a man away with it. In the US, a giant tornado swept through the state of Colorado. Meanwhile, practicing yoga is good for your mind and your body. Having pets can brighten your dull day. Some yoga enthusiasts in New Delhi, in India, have mixed the two, creating a perfect way to unwind and de-stress. And finally, what makes August the 9th significant? On this day in 1945, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Nagasaki. The bomb was codenamed Fat Man. About 40,000 people were killed immediately. This led to Japan's unconditional surrender in the Second World War. That'll be all for now. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Okay. Yes, I will have her give you a call as soon as everything's in the clear. You're welcome.